Welcome back, Chiefs Kingdom, to another episode of 41 is the Mic. I am Matt Derrick from Chiefs Digest, alongside draft week enthusiast Nick Jacobs.
This is my time of the year, Matt. For people, there's some people that love Christmas. There's some people that love Thanksgiving. And then there's people like me that wait for the draft every single year. Fell in love with the draft in the early 90s. One of my favorite drafts involved the likes of Jerome Woods, Reggie Tongue, John Browning, and Donnie Edwards. So that was a fun draft class. I want to say it was 96 back then. So that was one of the times where I watched it from start to finish. And it's just different. It's just funny how different the times are, to where I was getting the Kansas City Star and I'd have that mock draft that I'd be looking at and what they did versus what ended up happening that day. And man, I remember how long the first round was. The first round took forever. Like, I remember the first round at one point, I want to say it's like 6 hours, because it would start early that morning on a Saturday, and it would just go. The first round would not be over till like between 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and then they would finally start on like the second and third round after that, and then that would go till 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock that night.
And that's the thing that, especially if you're a younger fan, you're just getting into the NFL, or you've been watching it for like the last 15 years. Yeah, the days of the one whole day on Saturday and Sunday, because the last couple of rounds were on Sunday back in the day. So they basically went all day Saturday and then half the day Sunday with the draft. And the first round was at least 15 minutes, if not 20 at one point. So you're right. And, when you were watching it, it was just, and they did not have, obviously, the editing that they have abilities today, where they can, with digitally, you can cut so much stuff and quickly. Mm-hmm. So back then, they would have like one highlight package for each player, but wouldn't play it for the most part until the player got drafted. So, and they didn't have, war room cameras everywhere. So basically what you were just watching for 15 minutes was just like Chris Berman on set talking with, the other talking heads, and you get shots of, guys on telephones going back to, because that didn't have anything else. They were just always on the phone at their tables, and there wasn't a crowd. There was nobody. There wasn't an attendance. I mean, it was just it could have been like watching paint dry, but because it was the NFL draft and it was like this insight that you just didn't get. And I mean, even as recently as like what was it? Probably would have been like 2001, Sports Night, the great sitcom on ABC, even had an episode where they were covering the NFL draft, and it was the big deal was that if it rained at Indian Wells in the desert, to cancel coverage of the tennis tournament, that they were going to get to cover the second round of the draft, because at one time, second round of the draft, the other rounds weren't on TV. Mm-hmm. So this today, I mean, in over 3 days, it is a smorgasbord of programming. I almost just wish that they would, it was almost something like we're basically binging the NFL draft. I almost wish that, if the NFL draft lasted like, 6 weeks, and they just did a different round every week.
No, you don't mean what you're saying right now.
If the NFL heard that, they might actually do it. If they thought they could stretch the draft out 6 weeks and get everybody to tune in every 6 weeks, they'd do it.
Nothing surprises me with the NFL.
It would be the best reality show in the history of mankind, because then think about, the amount of coverage that there would be in between rounds. Who's going to be the first pick of the fifth round, Nick? We'd be talking about it for a week.
And rookie camp would be apparently 4th of July.
So you'd have to start the draft in like March, sure.
Yeah. It is certainly an idea, Matt. Certainly an idea.
Well, we kind of kicked off draft week on Friday, getting to talk to Brett Veach. And Brett was Brett's always in a pretty good mood with us, especially in the spring and before the draft, because this is his favorite time of year too. Yeah. Even though he's probably spending 20 hours a day in the office for the most part. But he loves this. I mean, obviously he loves evaluating talent. He loves evaluating players. I mean, that's how he kind of, grew up in this game and cutting his chops. I mean, he was watching film for Andy back in Philadelphia and going in and saying, "Oh, you gotta look at this guy's tape," and hey, it's Deshaun Jackson, and yeah. So Brett goes for this stuff and I think we talked to him for about 20, 25 minutes on Friday.
Yeah.
What stood out to you, Nick? What was that Brett said that really resonated a chord with you?
Well, I mean, Matt, I'm gonna have to do it here on the podcast. Whenever I asked him about his board, and he mentioned 221, there was a key caveat in there, and we're gonna play it right now.
I wrote that down. I knew someone was going to ask me that
Yeah.
because I never know. I just see a bunch of names up there.
Right.
I don't like count them. I sort of just move them around and I have them in like pockets. But I was walking in here. I said, someone's going to ask me exactly how many guys I have on the board. So it's 221, which is a lot. But you'd have to come in here and be with me one day to see how I process this because, like, I have guys in the 6th or 7th round on my board, but I always know that we'll never get to the 6th and 7th round. So the total number of boards, total number of players on the board is 221. But in my mind, there's kind of like a line right there. And those guys in 6 and 7, we keep on the board because that's where I want to work down on free agency. And so I know where I'm going. As soon as the draft's over, the guys that we had on the board at 6 and 7, again, we'll have plenty of numbers. We'll never get to them. But that's my free agency board. And that's kind of how we work through that.
So, Matt, did you catch the key part in that one?
Key part to me was he's already planning on the after the draft free agency.
Yeah. All I'm saying is I heard an invitation for me in there from asking that question when he said, "Hey, you'd have to come over and look at sometime." I can't unless you're inviting me. It sounds like you're inviting me, sir.
That was clearly an invitation. That was clearly an invitation. I'm
not going to show up there without an official one because I got to feel like security's gonna be like, "What are you doing here? Like, go home." But all I'm saying is I felt like there's some people that want to go to Disney World, that dream of going to Disney World, and then there's people like me that love the NFL draft and being able to see the Chiefs draft board and see how wrong my draft board would be from theirs would be enjoyable. I would enjoy that. I'm weird like that. What can I say?
I mean, I feel like that we should start a GoFundMe or something of that nature that we'll give the money to charity if everybody contributes to. We'll give it to the Chiefs charities if Brett invites you to come in and check out the draft prep. I mean, that's a win-win for everybody.
But that's fine. But I'm saying I feel like we already have it on record.
We have it on record. I'm just trying to sweeten the pot.
I think he's just just saying it. Hey, you have to check it out, and I'll be like, "Sir, you said that to the wrong person that would gladly check that out." 4 a.m., 5 a.m. I don't care. I'll be there.
You invited the wrong gentleman, as Patrick Mahomes would say.
Hey, I mean, I don't know, but I'm open to it.
And I was kind of surprised. I mean, he mentioned that the 221 was a big number, and that is. I mean, because in the past, you and I were talking off air. I think that the largest number he's ever told us before is like 190. So that's a lot, and that's the one thing that a lot of people don't get is that and he talks about the pockets of players and how he sees them on the board, and that's the thing that a lot of people don't get. Just a casual fan is that teams' draft boards are wildly divergent. There are going to be obviously players who aren't on the Chiefs draft boards because of character issues, red flags, scheme fit, personalities, size, arm length, you name it. I mean, there's going to be players who aren't on the Chiefs draft board for some reason. Maybe they can't change direction well. You never know why they're not on the board.
I wonder who you're talking about.
But, so that's why he's saying is that they're going to get through the 7th round of the draft and it might not take a player after 150 on their board. And that's how most teams are. So he's got then that 221 list. Well, that's because as soon as the draft's, actually even before the draft's over, even the 5th and 6th round, they will start making calls to prospective undrafted free agents who they've already contacted, by the way. I mean, there's some undrafted free agents that they've had in for 30 visits. But Saturday, they're going to be working the phones during the draft saying, hey, if your guy doesn't get drafted, we want him. So, those college free agents are not signed after the draft. There are deals done. And a great example for everybody, the reason why the Chiefs drafted Trey Smith when they did, Trey Smith had a deal with another team in place that if he didn't get drafted, and the Chiefs knew they were not going to sign him, that he had already made a deal with that team, and the offer was in there. I mean, the moment the draft was over, Trey Smith was signing with another team. The Chiefs knew that, and they knew that the only way that they were going to get him was to draft him in the 6th round. So, that's how this thing works, Nick.
Yeah, and I get a pretty good idea who that team was. I got a really good idea who that team was, and I think it worked out really well for Trey Smith's career. Got a handful of Super Bowls, and so I think Trey. I think it all worked out for Trey.
Yes, I think it worked out quite well for both sides in that measure. Leading into, because we're going to be making our mock draft today, and another thing about Brett's press conference on Friday I kind of want to talk about was when I asked him about trading up for a non-quarterback, because obviously he's traded into the 20s before, but he's never made a move. And the Chiefs obviously drafting at 32, and in Brett Veach's day, so far, I mean, I think their earliest draft pick was 27. That was the one that they got from the Dolphins. Mm-hmm. So, and because they obviously they moved out of 2018's draft, they traded the 2019 first round pick for Frank Clark. So, Brett didn't have a first round pick for his first few drafts, and then they traded another one, with Orlando Brown. So he hasn't had a ton of first round picks, but they've all been super low picks.
Right.
But, hey, the Chiefs went 27-10 to get Mahomes. To me, the question was, hey, would you be willing to go into the top 10, top 15 for a non-quarterback? And his answer was yes.
I mean, I can envision myself. I mean, got to get the owner's approval on that, but no, I think it changes every year, and I think we have a pretty good plan this upcoming week. But yeah, I think, listen, every situation is unique. I mean, we have had conversations in the last few years about guys that we consider top 5, top 6 prospects if they were to fall into the teens moving up, and got Clark and Andy involved, and they were all in it, and those situations just didn't work out. So I think that I certainly could see something like that. A lot of things have to fall in place, though, for that to happen. So it'd have to be probably a specific guy or two, and then probably getting into a landing spot that's not expected. And then if he does get to that landing spot that's not expected, the team is willing to work with you on a trade that makes sense. So certainly can see it. A lot of things have to happen and fall in place for that to to see an outcome like that. But I always think anything's possible.
It can happen. I mean, he seemed pretty excited about the aspect too. And the little nugget that I now need to know for sure, though, is he said that there was a time that they wanted to do it, and he had to talk to the Clark Hunt, because if you're going to trade the first round pick, you need the owner on board. Mm-hmm. Head coach was on board. I need to know who that player was, Nick. Who were they wanting to move up to get? Maybe it was McDuffie. Maybe it was that they wanted to go up and get him earlier and then they couldn't. I don't think that was it, because I think they got McDuffie exactly kind of where they wanted. But there was somebody else, and I have a guess about what year it might have been, but I just don't know who the player might have been.
All right, Matt. So I want you guess the year. I'm gonna pull up. I'll pull it up and I'll take a guess. We will not be right. This will not be officially reporting anything. But correct. I just want to have some fun with this one.
I think it was 2020.
Okay. You think it's 2020, okay?
2020, when they drafted Clyde.
Okay. So I'm gonna pull up 2020 right now, looking through it. I'm gonna throw out candidates for people who don't have it in front of them.
There you go.
So candidate number 1 would be Brandon Ayuk from the 49ers. He was taken 25th overall.
Yeah.
Candidate number 2 in my book is Justin Jefferson, wide receiver from the Vikings.
Yeah.
Candidate number 3, maybe Jalen Reagor from the Eagles.
Yes.
Wide receiver.
Yes.
Candidate number 4 for me would be CeeDee Lamb at 17 from the Cowboys.
Yes.
I'm going to put candidate number 5. We're now getting to 15 with Jerry Jeudy to the Broncos. I don't know what candidate number we're on now, but Tristan Wirfs from the Bucks at 13.
Another name. That's another name I was looking at.
I don't think it's Mekhi Becton at 11. And the reason I say that is because if it were, he would already, like, they would have signed him since he's a free agent.
Yeah.
Then I'll say it at 10, Jedrick Willis from the Browns. I mean, maybe. But there's nobody else other than maybe Chase Young, but that was 2 overall. That was gonna be too hard to climb up for him. But yeah, it's looking like offensive tackle or receiver, potentially. So Matt, what name are you thinking?
I mean,
again, folks, this is not a report.
Exactly. I mean, I'm feeling if he's talking, because I was specifically asked about moving into the top 15.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's got to be somebody there. Like if they had wanted Justin Jefferson, they still could have gotten Justin Jefferson because he went 22. So I feel like it was either Wirfs or Lamb, and I think I think it's Tristan Wirfs.
Okay.
That's the one that makes the most sense to me because that's the guy that even back then, I mean, everybody thought Tristan Wirfs was going to be a stud. I mean, Becton, even in retrospect, I mean, I was still surprised then that Tristan Wirfs wasn't the first tackle off the board. I mean, he just seemed like absolutely super stud, and obviously he's proven that since then. So I feel like it was worse. Once again, I mean, Lamb went 17, so it could have been Jerry Jeudy, but I feel like, because once again it comes back to value. But I had this discussion with someone a couple of weeks ago. There's only 2 positions I'm moving up for dramatically in an NFL draft. It's quarterback, because that's the franchise. You have to get the quarterback right. And it's offensive tackle, because those guys are so important. Left tackles are so important, and they just don't boom and bust for the most part. I mean, people say that Eric Fisher was a disappointment because, he was the first round pick in the draft. Well, and it was arguably a weak draft, all of that. But Eric Fisher was still a really, really good player for a long time. I mean, he didn't bust. He won a Super Bowl.
And here's the funny part: when you mention the name, they're still trying to replace him.
Yeah, exactly.
Since 2020.
That was a successful draft pick for me. Even if it wasn't, what you wanted, it was still a successful draft pick. So this was my roundabout way of getting into our mock draft, Nick, of, prepping everybody that Chiefs might be making a move. And I want to hear your pick first, though. I'm going to give you the honors of the first option.
I'll finish one thought real quick. I agree with you. If you're going to give up a future first to move up into the teens, which the Chiefs would have to do to get one of those impact guys, the teens to anywhere into the top 10, if you're going to give up a future first, in my book, it's always either going to be, like you said, quarterback, a franchise left tackle, or such an impact number 1 wide receiver that you're not going to be able to get anywhere else that can, especially in this situation, be able to replace Travis Kelce's importance in the offense. Like if you're doing that, you're doing it for one of those 3 reasons more than anything else. That's why you would have to do that. So if it's not in that, and I'm not saying Brock Bowers, because I personally wouldn't give up a future first for Brock Bowers. But if it's Marvin Harrison, if it's Rome Odunze, if it's, Malik Neighbors or a Joe Alt, then those are the ones that if they fall, that's the ones you're trying to make that play for. And then, Fuaga from Oregon State, he's really more of a right tackle. So unless you're convinced he could be a left tackle for you, then you don't want to, risking that much is probably not the greatest idea in the world in that regard. But I mean, I'm not saying you don't go trade up for Brock Bowers if you want him, but you just don't want to give up that future first unless it's somebody that's going to fill one of those 3 spots, because where the Chiefs are at 32, you're likely not getting one of those 3, and you are going to have to risk something pretty big to be able to make that happen.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, there's a handful of receivers, and particularly in this year's draft. I mean, there might be some years I would say there's not a receiver worth trading up for. In this year's draft, there's probably 3 for sure that I would say jumping into the top. Oh, well, a couple probably even top 5, but that's too big of a leap for the Chiefs to make. But there's 3 receivers absolutely that are, if they're available in the top 15, worth going to get. And I think even Brian Thomas, I think, is worth moving up a few spots to make sure if that's the one you want, because After that, I mean, there's another drop off. I mean, there's another group there between probably, depending on who you ask, 5 to 13th or 14th receiver in the draft that could all be second round picks.
Right.
So, but there's not the ones you jump up for. But those three at the top, yeah, I mean, if any one of them is in the top 15, I'd be making calls.
So, Matt, we will finally kick off the 2024 41 is the Mike Chiefs mock draft, sponsored by nobody.
Yet.
Okay. So yeah, for first round, I did this is the one of me trying to project what potentially could happen or guys that would be on their board. This isn't the I Dream Big one. That'll be later this week. That'll be on KSHB.com. And that's where I'm going to do some reckless things, and I don't care. You can say I'm stupid or whatever you want to about it, but I'm going to get joy out of writing the words that I'm going to write. So that's all that matters.
Right.
So first round, 32nd. I don't have any trades involved in this because, that's just not how I roll, to quote Andy Reid. I went the safe route with Ladd McConkey from Georgia, just because he's a guy who can get open. You're not having to move up or down for him, and it gives you a reliable receiver that knows where he needs to go, where he's going to be, times it, and that's the biggest thing that Patrick Mahomes is going to need in a wide receiver, is that they have the ability to get open. They have the ability to get to the spot they're supposed to be at. They understand how to get to where they're supposed to be at. The knock that's going to be on him I'll be curious to see what teams do, is going to be some of the medicals of some of the injuries he's had in his career, where some medical teams feel like they're at with that. So that's what I did in the first round.
No notes. That is absolutely a solid pick, and probably a player who's reasonably going to be there. I mean, there's a chance that, in some universes he goes higher than that, but I think it's a very solid pick. Absolutely. I mean, a popular pick, I think, amongst Chiefs fans, but that to me is a 320-yard drive down the middle of the fairway, Nick. I mean, that would be a perfect fit for this offense. You the man, is what I would be saying after that pick. You are being absolutely reasonable and conservative, and I am going to be recklessly aggressive with my first round selection.
I like it.
And I'm going to be messy with it because I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to guarantee my position. I'm taking an offensive tackle, but I have 3 that I'm going for. So I'm making a call to the top 10 if this player is there. If Joe Alt is available at 7, that's where I start my calls, because I think the Giants pick is just too high. There's just enough of a leap there in the numbers that you're going to need probably 4 picks to get 6 out of the Giants. And if Joe Alt falls to 7 with the Titans, that's where I'm like, let's talk. That's doable. To me, it would. I mean, looking at the different charts, I mean, reasonable move there would be a first, 32 this year, a first next year, and a third would get it done. Maybe, you might need to sweeten it to a second, depending on what the Titans chart is. Frankly, I'd be willing to do that. So if Joe Alt is there, I'm trying to make that move. Start with the Titans. If it ends up going to the Falcons and the Bears and the Jets, you do it. I mean, try every which way possible. I would make that move. If Joe Alt is not there and you can't get a deal done, nobody's going to agree with you. If Olu Fashanu is next in line, and for me, I mean, he probably starts being on the board as soon as Joe Alt conversations are done. As soon as he's off the board, I'm trying to make that move. I mean, you probably have to get to 11 because there's no way that the Broncos and the Raiders are trading with you. I don't know about the Saints. They might. 15, the Colts, they might. You never know. But you're not getting 12 and 13. So, to me, if you want Olu, you're going to probably have to get to 11. If neither one of those two swings works, I'm trading up for Marius Mims, wherever I have to go. I mean, those are 3 players that I think are very solid, future NFL tackles, and one can play immediately. After that, hey, J.C. Latham is a good player too. He probably should be in that conversation. He would be just next in line for me, but not worth. I mean, to me, if he's at 32, you take him there. I mean, there's some other tackles that if they're available at 32, I'm fine with them there. But those 3, and I would go as high as I mean, once again, how high do you need to go to get Mims? I'd start at 22 at least. I'd be tempted to start at 19 with the Rams, but I mean, it would probably be almost a cascading position where I would go so high for Alt, and there's a window for Alt until he's gone. And then Fosh and his windows open, as I would go for him there. And then after that, I go for Mims. So I would trade whatever I need to get to the top 25 to get any of those three guys. So I'm taking a tackle, and that's what I'm trying to do, Nick. So I know this is a weaselly way of saying what I'm picking because I'm picking three guys. But if that's what Brett Veach, that's what I'm doing to solidify that left tackle spot.
Well, Matt, and this is our mock draft. So whatever we want to do, we can do. So you just did it, and you showed why this mock draft is unique than any other mock draft in the entire country, because you gave hypothetical first-round selections that people can now look out for at 3 different wavelengths and 3 different levels.
There you go.
All right.
Bottom line, I'm trading, Nick.
Yeah, that's fine. So I'll move on to the second round here. At 64, I have an offensive tackle, Kieran Amakachi from Yale. I'm sure you're stunned that I took the nimble athletic tackle that I'm a really big fan of. But like for the Chiefs, I think they've got to come away, especially in the first handful of rounds, they've got to come away with this: a wide receiver that they can invest in that gives them insurance, an offensive tackle that they can invest in for long term. Down the road, further in the draft, that I think they need to come away with at least one interior offensive lineman, if not more, because the big thing you have coming up here down in the following year is Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith. Who do you pay among those two? Do you pay both of them? If you do, then you're going to have to use Joe Thuney's money to probably do that, to keep the cost at a certain level. And then the next question becomes with Jawan Taylor, you can get out of the contract after this upcoming year. Do you have, is Wanya Morris ready to be the right tackle? Do you have another offensive tackle that you drafted this upcoming year that can potentially replace him? So do you have your bookends set that are going to be cheap, that you don't have to pay $20 million per year for, and you can invest that in the interior offensive line for now until down the road when you need to invest that on your bookends, or continue trying to draft to keep that cheap? But along that offensive line, I think there's a certain number you got to be able to mentally kind of rearrange and move around, musical chair wise. Except it's called financial chair. So it's the financial chair. We're moving it around, and people are going to get, a couple people are going to get the $20 million seat, a couple aren't. But yeah, and I think that's the underrated part of this draft is that they're going to have to invest in interior to brace themselves if they aren't going to be able to financially pay somebody on that interior, or to give themselves the flexibility if they need to move one of them for draft assets the following year, that gives them the opportunity to do that. So that's where part of 2025, I think, comes into 2024 draft.
Yeah, and again, I mean, especially the 1-2 combination there, tackle, wide receiver, and then tackle, absolutely, because I'm doing the exact opposite. Whereas I'm obviously gave you 3 tackles that I'm taking in the first round. I'm going wide receiver, and this is this kind of fits in with you. I mean, it's best case scenario. I would be willing to trade up to get this player if necessary, because I can, depending on whom you look at from your draft prognostications, I mean, players can go wildly. So, I'm going, for my part, is trying to make a realistic pick. I'm using Dane Brugler's guide and board, so I'm not saying I'm going to, because that's the one thing I hate about mock drafts, Nick, and I know you do too, which is to say, hey, you know what? I am going to take Tyreek Hill in the first round. Or the 6th round. He too went the 5th, but take your pick. I mean, I'm going to take Eric Fisher, except I'm going to get him in the 4th. No, I mean, draft them where they're realistically available to go. This guy is gaining in popularity mostly because of Peter Schrager, but I think he's a 2nd round pick. Jalen Polk from Washington. Depending on who you ask, he's either maybe top 8, maybe top 13, top 15 receiver. I wish he had more production earlier in his Washington career and earlier in his college career, but he's a good receiver. And I think will be available there late in the 2nd round, put up some really nice numbers. When Brett Veach talks about, this being an older draft class, he's just turned 22. So, he's still relatively young. It's not like you're getting a 24-year-old like there are in some cases. And he's got a lot of college experience behind him. So he needs to be, smoothed out a little bit. But to me, that's a nice little lump of clay that you can drop into this Chiefs offense, and I think would be a productive player immediately.
And I think with any wide receiver, you mentioned part of it, the ability to change direction earlier when you mentioned that. But I think with any wide receiver that the Chiefs take, it's got to have that change of direction. I think they have to be good, crisp route runners that can run the full route tree or most of it. And then above all else, they know where they're going and they can get there on time. So that means they can get the clean releases. They're going to be reliable in catching the ball cleanly. And with those factors, that I think that's what the Chiefs are going to prioritize personally in the wide receivers that they potentially end up drafting if they do out of this draft class. I think that's all going to be a part of that. So somebody like Polk in Washington, where they have some of the best concentration skills at catching the football, I think that's always going to be a benefit for them. That the Chiefs didn't always have the best tracking at receiver the past couple of years, and Polk would be one of those guys that I think definitely gives them that.
All right, Nick. Third round.
I'll go third round, 95th overall, I believe. This is one that I think is going to surprise some people, and I want people to know this is the part of the draft where people, I think, are going to be surprised at how quickly everything deviates from what people are doing mock draft wise. Everybody's draft board in the league is probably going to be different. Team by team, it's going to be different by what they prioritize for their scheme. So whenever you're looking at the top 300 or the top 250, and they're trying to rank just the best player overall athletically or overall skill set wise, that's why people get so confused. Well, this guy had him in the 6th round and they took him in the 4th. That's how you get L'Jarius Sneeds of the world. The Chiefs took where they did. He was probably a priority free agent for some teams. Chiefs took him in the 4th, and they just turned him for some assets with the Tennessee Titans this year after a 4-year career where they developed him. So it's a matter of believing in your coaching staffs, recognizing what they need skill set wise, and being able to make that happen. So that's why I don't. Even the draft board I'm gonna end up putting out at some point if I ever get done with it, it's purely based on where I feel comfortable taking them for what the Chiefs are trying to do with them. And that may not be right. The Chiefs may have a different grade on it. Other NFL teams may not even have some of those guys on their board. That's just the world we live in. So in the 3rd round, who I have is defensive tackle Mason Smith from LSU. Now, the reason I have him is because he is very athletic. He runs a little hot and cold. And he has size-wise that's very similar to the guy that would potentially be in front of him. And he does show some signs of a really good pass rusher whenever he turns it on and he lights it up. So you pair him with Joe Cullen and you put him behind Chris Jones, you potentially do have a very exciting 3-tech that potentially will maybe boom or bust. But who he was in college, I don't know if that's who he's going to be in the NFL, if he has the right people surrounding him in a Chris Jones and a Mike Pennell and a Joe Cullen that can really light a fire under him and help show him the way.
Yeah, and I know going back to our conversation a couple of weeks ago about defensive tackles, and you go back there and hear all of Nick's thoughts. That was a player you really liked, so been high on him, and there's a lot to like there. So once again, no notes, Nick. I like all 3 of your selections so far. We'll see what you think of this one. I think it's a very solid. No, I think he's a very solid player, and I've been saying this for a few weeks. It's kind of a sneaky need for this team that not everybody's talking about. But Brett Veach mentioned it along one of his needs on Friday. Mm-hmm. Probably worth noting. He said there's probably only 2 positions that they really wouldn't maybe draft, and that's quarterback and linebacker. But almost everything else is on the board. And one of the first positions he mentioned was interior offensive line, because you mentioned about drafting for the future and the tackle position and how you fill that out with Jawan Taylor going forward. Well, right now, you don't have team control of Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith for 2025, other than the franchise tag potentially on one of them. And oh, by the way, you have Nick Bolton as a free agent too. And you've got a 33-year-old Joe Tooney slated to make $26.9 million under the cap. So, you could save $16.9 million from moving on from Joe Tooney next year. You potentially could be replacing 2 or 3 interior offensive linemen. So here I'm addressing that. I'm going with Boston College's Christian Mahogany. I think he fits the Chiefs' offensive scheme pretty well. Should be a guard, but I mean, once again, with interior offensive linemen, I mean, you could move him to center, I think, if you needed to. If for some reason you wanted to move Creed out of that spot, which I know there's been some talk, but I mean, I still think don't think Creed's got the yips or anything like that. I think he's going to be fine, but Mahogany would give you a cheap cornerstone going forward, in an era where you're not paying your starting left guard $26 million under the cap or cap hit of that amount. So I like Mahogany. Your mileage may vary, but I think that is one of the better needs. And then for me, that's one of the best values you can get at this point, because, there have been so many players at other positions that in the third round, you might be getting 4th or 5th round value if you look at some other positions.
Yeah. No, I have no issue with that, because he's a very quality interior offensive lineman. I really liked him at guard when I was looking at him the other day. Yeah, he plays with a chip on his shoulder, and that's kind of the biggest thing that I'm really looking for. Is there were some guys I saw play passive, and I was like, nope. So for me, that
you've reminded me of our dear friend Juice Therese Paylor, because one of my favorite lines from him was talking about offensive linemen, and I can't remember the player, the discussion, but I just remember him just saying in his distinct Therese Paylor voice that I am not going to try to imitate, Nick. No. I just remember him talking about he plays patty cake at the line of scrimmage. And I always remember Therese saying patty cake in his voice. And it cracked me up. It absolutely cracked me up.
Now, I will say a player him and I would have been talking about on the phone. I'm taking here in the 4th round. And for people that don't know, Therese and I, we chatted a lot about draft time and draft year. And he was always excited, like, once he published his when he would publish his all juice team. He was always excited. He would either text me or call me, and he would be like, "Man, Jacobs, you looked at that yet?" And I'm like, "No, not yet, man. But I promise you, I'm going to." And then a little bit later, "Come on, man, you looked at it now, haven't you?" I was like, "Yes, I did." And he's like, "You didn't say anything back?" And then and then we would go over it. And then I remember there was this guard from Kentucky a handful of years ago that I didn't like and didn't have on my board, and he saw that and he texted me and he's like, "Why didn't you put him on your board?" And I was like, "Dude," it's like I was like, I'm sorry. I was like, he didn't have that passion, dude. He was soft in the games I watched. So I was like, I told him, I was like, I don't need that in my life. I don't need to watch that on coach's film. And he thought it was funny, but he was disappointed. They put him on his all juice team. And I wasn't a fan of his. It really bummed him out. So, but this guard I've got in the 4th round of 131, Layden Robinson from Texas A&M. Now, the reason I have him is because he's got one of the better anchors I saw of interior offensive linemen, to where he could stonewall some people. And once he anchored in, and the grip he had hand wise, and the way he could extend his arms, and just how he locked people into place and didn't get pushed back by bull rushes. Because there's some guys when they bull rush you back especially on some of these interiors in the class, they can do some damage. But I mean, I thought I liked how he picked up, passed off. I know some people knocked him on his reports elsewhere, probably, but based on games. But from the games I watched, I saw a dude that was probably the closest thing in this draft class to what Trey Smith currently does. And I was like, that guarantees, hey, at minimum, if he has to replace Trey Smith, I at least have similar production. Or if he's on the opposite side, you got 2 of those with Creed Humphrey, and that's not a bad thing if you're trying to run the ball. Matt, what about your 4th round mock? And with 4th round, 131 overall, Matt Derrick selects.
Yeah, this is probably going to be the one that maybe was a head scratcher for some, especially because, you've got Isaiah Pacheco. But I need a little thunder and lightning at running back. And I mean, I still go back to 2018, that first half of the season, Nick. You drop a player like Kareem Hunt into the backfield, and you've got a different offense. I mean, it's just absolutely different. And there's a lot of things to like about Isaiah Pacheco, but I think there's a lot of things to like about this guy too. I took him in one of my mock drafts, and I'm falling in love with him, Nick. I mean, one of my draft crushes. Think that he could really fit in with this offense because I think that, high he can be a 1,000-yard back. If he bust, maybe he's only as bad as Jerick McKinnon. Maybe he's a third down back. But Will Shipley from Clemson, averaged over 5 yards a carry in college, good contact balance, which is that Kareem Hunt comparison. And when you start looking at his other numbers, boy, there's a lot of Kareem Hunt comparisons. He's a half-inch taller. He's 10 pounds lighter. I mean, that's really, Kareem even back then before he bulked up big time in Cleveland. I mean, Kareem always had a little bit more bulk. So Kareem was stronger than Shipley is, but Shipley's faster. As fast as Kareem was, Shipley's got a little bit more juice in him than Kareem did. So there's a lot of comparisons to them physically, their size, their speed, their production. Shipley showed a lot more, presence in the passing game later in his college career. Kareem obviously developed that his last year at Toledo and, proved that he could do that out of the backfield. Like I said, to me, Shipley high end is 1,000-yard back. Right now he can be a tandem with Pacheco. Maybe eventually take that job over on his own when Pacheco gets to a second contract. But worst case scenario, if he's a third down back in the likes of Jerick McKinnon, well, you need that too. So even though that makes for a crowded Chiefs backfield, I think that one position upgrading their backup running back could add a half yard to your offense per play. And if that takes your offense from, 6 to 6.5 or 6.5 to 7, I mean, that's taking a good offense to great.
You're not wrong, sir. I will move forward to the 5th round, 159th, I believe. I took a running back there. And the guy I took, I'm going to butcher his name, and I apologize in advance, but I promise I'll get it right if he ends up in a Chiefs locker room. Kamani Waddell from Troy. Now, what I like about him is he gives similar athletic ability to what Jerick McKinnon did in the backfield. And he's good in pass protection already. You really don't need to work with him in pass protection. He may be 5'8", but from a size perspective, you're getting a guy that was listed at 5'8", 215, and he can handle the wear and tear of an NFL, being in an NFL backfield. But I saw a lot of speed there. I saw a guy who could catch in the backfield, would be really good in screens, be athletic in screens, have that burst that I really want for that Chiefs backfield. But above all else, could be in pass pro and could do that and could give, like you talked about, that thunder and lightning between Pacheco's power with what all could bring to the table. So again, you and I are recognizing the same positions, just different kind of little pecking order on it. So I am curious, Matt, what we got going on for you here in the 5th round.
Well, we'll see. I am going a different position here. I mean, we've so far, at least we've been covering the same positions. I'm adding another one to the mix. I'll see if you get a player at this position down the road. Maybe you won't. Maybe this will be because we did not talk about our picks ahead of time. So if we end up with picking the same player at some point in the last few rounds, that will be an absolute wonderful coincidence. But this is a sneaky need for me because once again, you look at free agency going down the road. You look at the fact that right now the Chiefs have 3 really edge rushers that they trust and can play regularly. I mean, I think you need more depth there because you don't know at what point this season if you are getting Charles Omenihu back. So I need more bodies there. And Braden McGregor from Michigan is a body type of the Joe Cullen, Steve Spagnuolo, long, lean, fast. That's how they like them. I mean, he's got some polishing that he needs, but one of the scouting reports I read on him, Nick, is that he's fast and violent. And tell me that's not a Joe Cullen kind of guy. Had good production. I mean, he actually was pretty good, dropping back in pass coverage. Not that that's the most important thing for me, but considering the fact that the Chiefs do have their ends but drop back, I mean, I think he's got a little Mike Dana in him, not necessarily of the ability to flex inside and play that way, but as far as, being an end that will pursue and be tenacious in the same way that Mike Dana is. I think McGregor's got that in him. So might even be a little high to take him because he is kind of considered a development. If I needed, this is an option where if I'm Brett Veach and I get a chance to maybe move back in the sixth and still get a guy like McGregor and pick up an extra seventh so I can get one of those undrafted guys that are going to sign with somebody else. Maybe that's a possibility here, but that's where I'm going, Nick.
Yeah, and I have he's on my board, and I think we talked about it in the edge rusher ones. And I mean, he's 277, so I mean, he gives you that ability to kind of stand up against the edge, size wise, perspective wise, and he comes from Michigan. So I mean, like, there's nothing I'm not gonna knock it because he's a guy that I would be happy to see the Chiefs have on the draft ticker if they ended up taking him. I will move on to the next one. He's in the 5th round, 173 here. I have another wide receiver. This one could potentially play slot for the Chiefs. He would be a returner immediately for him. He was at the East-West Shrine Bowl, and he, if I remember correctly, he's from Leavenworth, and that is Anthony Gould from Oregon State. Now, the reason I have him is, like I just said, the guy's got some burner speed to him, and he can immediately be a returner for him. He would give the Chiefs a jolt in their return game that they desperately need from a speed perspective because he returned a punt, I believe it was a punt, in the East-West Shrine game. Like, that was his impact, and you saw him just outrun every angle, make a couple moves, had the vision, boom, gone, done. And so I think he could be very beneficial for the Chiefs' future kick returns coming up here. He's already done it before, and he could have an impact in that regard. And then I think it gives you insurance as another receiver you invest in and slowly work into this offense. And I think he's got the speed to be able to kind of make it happen for you. There's a different speed receiver returner I'm going to be taking in my later mock on Wednesday. But you can rest assured most of the positions are going to be the same. How about you, Matt, at 173?
I mean, I'm going to give you at least a hint. I am taking another receiver in this draft, but it won't be until the final selection. So I am double dipping at receiver as well.
As you should.
In the 5th round, I'm going with another sneaky need. It's more for looking towards 2025 when you don't have a Justin Reed under contract, and your secondary at safety is Brian Cook and Jamari Connor, which is a fine duo. But the Chiefs put 3 safeties on the field way too often to not have addressed that third safety spot because obviously injuries as well play into it. You got depth for this year because you do have Deion Bush coming back, but Deion Bush is primarily a special teams player, and he's there, defensively, break glass only in case of emergency. So there's several you could go with here. The guy that I kind of like at the end because I think he fits the Chiefs defensively the most is Keaton Oladapo. He seems to be a pretty flexible guy. I know that there's a belief that he would be kind of a pretty good, nickel or dime, and that's where if Jamari Connor steps into a starting lineup, you kind of need your safety to be able to play. If he can kick inside, be that third safety. I think he's also got the potential that if you want to keep Connor in kind of the role where he kind of plays inside, and you want to keep Cook, where he plays, Oladapo I think is versatile enough to play some different spots. There's other players I think you could get in the 5th and 6th round if you need it. I mean, like I said, trade back. I think the Chiefs will address safety at some point in this draft, potentially. Like I said, I mean, this was difficult for me because, Brett Veach talked about the fact that, you really get into the 4th round of this draft and suddenly your pockets of players are all older. And it's maybe just not as deep a draft as it was in the past. And, usually you're looking in the 4th, 5th, and 6th rounds, you're looking for maybe 21, 20-year-olds that are out there that, can grow into the role. Maybe they, entered college earlier or they're early exits or juniors or 3 years out of high school. So, they're younger players. But, Brett mentioned NIL keeping some players in, and I think that's definitely a case. But remember, we're also dealing with COVID. Still, we've got COVID classes. So the number of players that you are looking at in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th rounds and beyond, the number of 5th and 6th year seniors is absolutely incredible. And as a result, there's a lot of 23 and 24-year-olds out there, which I think is going to make, Brett mentioned it, but I agree with him completely. It's going to make this, end of the draft really interesting because do you take an older player who's maybe played a lot in college and has a ton of experience, but is 24, or do you take a younger guy who's 21, not as experienced, maybe not as developed, but is going to, require maybe a redshirt year?
Matt, you make points I can't dispute. So it'll be interesting to keep track after the draft on that one in terms of what the age of each guy is based on round and what they do. So I'm intrigued by that one. So finally, pick 221 for me in the 7th round. I took cornerback Jarius Monroe from Tulane. I personally like how physical he is as a tackler. I like the variety where he worked inside and outside at cornerback for Tulane. I also like that he could play off if he needed to. He pressed at times if he needed to, and I thought he had enough athletic ability. I can't remember his 40 time may have not been as good as like what that you potentially want, and that's why he'd be there in the 7th round or priority free agent. But from what I've seen Dave Merritt do over the years, what I saw traits wise for that guy when I was watching his some of his games, I'm like, there's too much promise there to not work with that, especially in the 7th round.
Yeah, and once again, we talked about it before, Dick. I mean, you give Dave Merritt talent, he is absolutely going to squeeze something out of it. And once again, will not be surprised if one of the Chiefs, free agents that they sign after the draft and priority free agents is a golden retriever that Dave Merritt can turn into a corner because he will turn that guy into a Pro Bowler. I'm swearing. I'm one day it's going to happen.
You're just going to see on the transaction wire.
Airbud signed to the Chiefs.
Airbud from the KC Pet Project.
I mean,
Pet Project.
I mean, and I say a golden retriever. Obviously we're going for the Airbud reference, but I mean, honestly, Dave Merritt could probably take a well-disciplined cat and turn him into a good corner because even though giving up a lot of length, I mean, there's some cats that have great leaping ability that can play bigger than they are. So I think, if you can get a teachable cat, Dave Merritt could absolutely coach them into a productive player. But I'm not giving Dave Merritt a toy with my 7th round draft pick. I will save those for the undrafted free agency. This is a player that probably is going to be available at 7 because there are some red flags because of off the field issues. It's Joshua Cephas from Texas San Antonio. Really speedy guy, decent speed, at least I should say. I mean, 4.58 in the 40, not great, but there's 2 things about him that I really like. And that one is that his height, he's 6'2", good size. The second thing is that he does not drop the football. The last couple of years, he had, I think it's 177 catches and 3 drops. Played in the Shrine Bowl, did pretty well there. Last year, 10 touchdowns, 1 drop. I mean, just does not drop the football. And talk about one offense that needs a guy like that. Like I said, he's got good size, not the fastest guy, but is this somebody who can get contested catches? Is this a guy who you can rely on to, for even short throws to make the catch? Can he play multiple spots? I think he can. So, I mean, I think he's there because of the off-the-field issues. He had a DUI arrest in college. So it's a concern, especially with the Rishi Rice thing. But at the same time, if you're getting a good player at a spot because of the red flag issues, and you think it's somebody who's going to respond, hey, and he certainly seemed to respond last year. He is a little older. He's 23, but once again, you get into this part of the draft, that's a lot of players are going to look like that.
Well, Matt, I believe that concludes our 7-round Chiefs mock draft for this episode. Is there any final thoughts you have?
I can't wait for this week, Nick. I mean, I know I'm not as excited as you are because nobody's excited as you are.
I'm sure there's somebody out there. I just don't know who I just don't
there's
know.
Not. I mean, there are probably I know there are people as excited as you are. I can't imagine there being anybody more excited than you are for this week, but I love it too. It is a lot of fun, and it is really, truly for me the beginning of the year. I mean, even maybe off-season workouts, but because of the off-season workouts are virtual now with the Chiefs, it doesn't really feel like the beginning of the 2024 season. This is kind of the kickoff for me because now we're getting back into the flow of things. We're getting back to actually being in the building and around the team. So to me, I feel like football's coming back, Nick. It's getting ready. This is it.
Yeah, and this is going to be a big week overall. If as long as the guests don't cancel on us, because they're busy, we got a couple hopefully bonus episodes this week for you that we will know for sure on Monday if they're happening or not. If you're listening to this on Monday, well, they may have already dropped at that point. So we're hopefully gonna have a couple of those for you. I don't think we heard back from many of the prospects that we reached out to, despite there being more than 30 of them. There's one we were close to and ended up not working out. But then I saw that prospect on a lot of different national stuff, and it hurt my heart every time that I saw it because I'm like, I was hoping he'd be on, but didn't work out that way. So this is going to be a busy week. There's going to be a lot of content for Chiefs Digest and KSHB.com, and Matt and I are going to put out a lot of videos this week, and we'll have recaps after each round. Saturday, I don't know. I think the Saturday one we'd probably do on Sunday just because you're going to be chasing down undrafted free agents, and that's going to be a hectic, busy night for you. So that after Saturday's done, you probably won't hear from Matt and I until that Sunday because all those undrafted free agents, I know you're going to be chasing them down for hours, and so will other people trying to get those confirmations, and that's an all-night affair on top of already commenting or writing articles on the guys the Chiefs are going to take in day 3. So but there's going to be a lot to listen to and to look forward to, and hopefully some unique perspectives from some of the guests we are trying to get on. And so, Matt, any final parts?
Yeah, just there's going to be a lot because obviously we already have scheduled. We're going to be doing the Q&A on Tuesday night before the draft. Then we will have daily draft coverage. On Thursday and Friday after the rounds are over, recapping what the Chiefs did. Yeah, because of the long day of Saturday that will probably fold into Sunday's pod, wrapping up not only Saturday, but just the entire Chiefs draft. Probably a few, hopefully, cross your fingers, the bonus episodes. And I will, we'll see how it all works out logistic-wise, but planning even some live updates from 1 hour ahead drive from inside the facility with the Chiefs as the draft is going on. We'll see how that goes and everything, but you'll get an alert if you are subscribed to the channel. So make sure you subscribe to Chiefs Digest here on YouTube. You will get the alerts that we're going live. So that is always a help. Hit the bell to like us, leave a review, and hey, tell us about what you think of the mock draft. Tell us your review of our mock draft in the comments. So love to hear it. So offer up your own mock drafts, share them with us. So
and then I'll say on KSHB, we're gonna have draft specials at 6:30 on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. It'll be from 6:30 to 7. It is called On the Clock, sponsored by Hellsberg Diamonds. So that'll be big for us, and then we'll stream after 10:35 on Thursday and Friday. We're hoping to get the press conferences. That'll be stream only because we're not interrupting Jimmy Fallon. I can tell you that right now. But they'll be stream only, but we're hoping to have the pressers from Andy Reid, Brett Veach, depending on what time they pick and what ends up happening. We're hoping to be able to have that and to be able to kind of give that on our KSHB.com. So between Chiefs Digest and KSHB.com, you're going to get all the draft coverage you can handle from Matt and I. And then, like Matt said, 41 is the mic. We'll be back next Sunday to recap the whole entire kit and caboodle of the draft. And then the following week, rookie camp starts. So then football is truly 100% back at that point. And I'm happy, Matt, that rookie camp is not on Mother's Day weekend this year.
There you go.
That is a big one because I think all the women in the Chiefs coaches' life, the players' lives, deserve that weekend to be recognized and honored. And the fact that that can happen without football involved that weekend, I thought that was a nice touch. And I
haven't checked the schedule. I guess it will. I'm trying to remember the dates for sure because it starts.
It's like 4th, 5th.
Yeah,
4th, 5th, 6th. Mother's Day is on the 12th.
I'm hoping on Saturday there's tradition that Brett Veach will come over to us and give us his Derby picks, because that's a tradition like any other at Chiefs rookie minicamp.
And
Is
he's talking actual Derby picks. He's not talking players on the field. Talking Kentucky Derby.
No, he
Just for
is a
people
huge Kentucky Derby fan, a huge horse racing fan. So not only just Formula One, but so yeah. And it seems like always this time of year. I mean, you got the race in Miami, or there's an F1 race somewhere, but always the Kentucky Derby during minicamp weekend. And yeah, I like Brett's handicapping every year, so hopefully we get that on Saturday. And as you mentioned, I know the Chiefs' plan is Thursday night. Andy Reid after the team makes a pick. Brett Veach at the end of the first round on Thursday. Assistant General Manager Mike Berganzi will be going on Friday night after the second round, and then we get to hear from the area draft scouts on Saturday after each of the picks. So that's always nice to be able to hear some new voices. I always like being able to talk to Berganzi, and the area draft scouts, always have great insights into not just the picks on Saturday, but even the ones that they scouted that go in the first, second, and third round too.
And it's always good for them to kind of get in front of the media and get that practice in case they're an assistant GM or general manager down the road. And that's something I think a Chiefs organization always does a great job of, is preparing those guys to have those moments and to have to deal with those questions and have to do that to help them grow their careers for down the road.
Absolutely. So we got a busy week here, Nick. We got a busy week. So I guess we better start cracking to it.
All right. So until next time, I bid you adieu.